So depending on this match and the next match, we could have an interesting race and an interesting race for the rest of the bracket spots. And it looks like we are underway. 2-5 is a pretty good first level to see. Unfortunately, Dave taking a very quick death. This is what I was talking about with vanilla experience versus randomizer experience. A lot of your P-speed strats that you're familiar with if you do a lot of Warpless tend to not work in randomizer because of the enemies. Oof, and we have 7-9 with a little cheap as the second stage in the game. Because you can outrun the little cheap at P-speed, it can respawn in the middle of your run and cause you to take damage or even a very quick death. And Dave making the same mistake that Proa did. One big issue with 7-9 in the randomizer is because of the large number of enemies on the screen, you may need to do some camera manipulation to actually pick up the blocks. Because whenever you pick up an ice block, that's considered a sprite on screen, and if there are too many sprites on the screen, you won't be able to pick up those blocks. So what Proa is trying to do here is manipulate the roving Cheap Cheap to stay in a position where it will interfere in the least amount possible. And Proa is through. And Dave should be through shortly as well, but it is still early. And our first fort will be a 4F2. This is a pretty easy fortress in Randomizer. The only issue you might have is at the end. Because some combinations of enemies and space waffles can cause you to take damage towards the end. And if you're used to vanilla, I find that having a tail is actually very, very useful in Randomizer because it gives you a lot more time to react to hazards that you've never seen. Now, with this particular flag set, we will not see any elements on the maps themselves shuffled. So both of these runners, but especially Proa, has hammer logic down to almost a science. Typically, you'll want to use a hammer to break a lock or a boulder if it will save you 3 stages. And both of our runners making use of that early hammer, the same early hammer that you would get in vanilla, ironically, to be able to skip a lot of stages and go straight to the pyramid stage. Oof, that is a very nasty blooper family. If you miss that jump, it's very easy to die. So with both of the group flags, the end card game is on. Every time you get 80,000 points, an end card will spawn on the world map, and you can play a card matching game to get items. The pictures on the cards are not representative of what you will get. That is something that Fred is trying to work on for a future version. But currently, you will not be able to see what items you get immediately from the card game. You will need to check your inventory afterward, and Proa is through the first world of the game. But this is still close. There's only about half a stage difference right now between our runners. And apparently our first king, the ruler of the Desert Kingdom, is General MacArthur. And our second world is World 6. Proa very cognizant of his point total, spawning the end card at the start. Not getting any matches right away. Typically it takes 3, sometimes 4, rarely 2 end cards to actually be able to complete a card. Now, as far as the patterns go, all of the patterns for the end card are new, but there are still 8 patterns, and which pattern you get is determined by how many frames that the icon has been on the screen for. So if you can consistently get the same number of tiles away on the world map, you can actually get yourself the same spawn, and a couple of our runners are very good at doing that end card manipulation, especially Human Mustard. And we did get a nice pipe in World 6, so our runners will be able to skip several stages there. Already almost at the halfway point of what is typically a very lengthy World 6. And Proa has found a hand level. Each of these hand levels will have an item, but all of the items will be the same for each. So anytime you find a hand level in the seed, you will get a hammer suit. I like Proa's play of checking the Toad House here. Toad Houses are very valuable early just to get you a couple of items to get through the early game. Since depending on what stages you see early, you can be in dire need of some items to get you through terribly difficult stages that happen early. Once we get through the first couple of areas of the game, then you'll typically have enough of an inventory that you can just blast through the last couple of worlds. And it looks like our runners are actually pretty even now. Proa does have a slight item advantage. Oh boy, we have 7-1. How many tries is this going to take? Proa with a second try clip. Dave does have a tail, so it's actually going to make this clip significantly more difficult for him. When you have a tail, you will not have consistent subpixels, and this trick is actually sub-pixel perfect if you have a tail. With no tail, the trick is merely pixel perfect. And Proa finds himself in 1F. Knowing how 1F works in the logic is much more important for the second flag set. Because of the item in 1F, when you obtain that item, it does not actually remove the door. So that fortress can never be logically required to complete any world. So there are restrictions on where that fort can be. And it does look like, after trying the tail clip about 20 times, Dave will just play the level. And this is not a short level either. And unfortunately, Dave does not have an inventory item that will give him just Big Mario without a tail. One thing that you'll see several runners do when encountering this stage is if they have a tail, they'll often get killed by the first enemy in the stage, and then go back to their inventory and use either a mushroom or a fire flower to be able to get to Big Mario to make the clip easier. So now we have about a 1-stage lead on Proa's side. Bunch of P-Wings in the end card game, but I suspect that if Proa does not find hammers or clouds in the end card game, he will not play any more of them. I'm not quite sure about Dave's comfort level with the randomizer yet. But depending on if there are a lot of just good safety items, you might see it. But typically if there are no level skipping items in the end cards, players will not play them after their first round. So with a bunch of quick levels, as well as that very favorable pipe, our runners are making pretty quick work of World 6. Dave taking that second overworld pipe, not realizing that there are only 2 pairs of pipes in World 6, might be a lack of familiarity with the randomizer. As we had speculated in the first... at the beginning of this match, we had speculated that this would be any percent experience versus randomizer experience, and it's starting to show. What Dave is trying to do is he's trying to manipulate the position of the boss bass so that it's not in his way at the end of the level. And Proa has reached a World 1 as the 3rd world, but without a hammer, we'll need to play these 3 stages. We've only seen the 1 hammer. And on this flag set, I absolutely agree with the use of the hammer here. Because anytime you can skip 3 stages with a hammer, it's very profitable. Takes a couple tries, but Dave is flying in 1-6. And meanwhile, Proa is in 6-10, does lose a leaf, might be digging for a fire flower, but does not get it. Now that shell, if you put a shell in between those ice blocks, it can be very tricky to navigate through them without taking any damage. And Proa does delay at the end of that level to avoid collecting 3 star cards. 8 lives should be plenty for a runner such as that. And this is where that vanilla knowledge and vanilla experience is coming into play, seeing Dave not taking the pipe. If you can maintain P-speed, the pipe route is actually slower, but it's also much more dangerous as you see Dave taking a death. Very well done by Dave dodging that last thwomp. That's something that takes a lot of practice to do. That's close to pixel perfect, I want to say. Pro going back for some more end cards. I'm not sure if either one of these runners actually writes down the positions of the end cards, but it can be very valuable to do so if you're familiar with the manipulation. And Proa finishing off that end card. There is a hammer in the end cards, so we may see Proa play these, especially if there is familiarity with how to manipulate the board. And meanwhile, Dave finishing up World 2, so we do have Proa opening up quite a bit of a lead. Looks like about a 4-stage lead. And we have 8-2. Proa will be taking the Sand of Shame, although depending on what enemy configurations you get in 8-2, the Sand of Shame might not be the best name for it. Maybe the Sand of Sanity. So far, this has actually been a pretty friendly seed. We haven't seen any of the truly nasty levels yet. Dave taking 5 up with the lives count on his side. I don't blame him. And while logic is definitely something you need to be familiar with this randomizer, it doesn't matter as much as it does in others, especially the Zelda series randomizers, where those more test your understanding of the logic. This randomizer stress tests your ability to react to random elements on the fly. And it does look like Dave does write down the end cards. I did actually look, and Dave's wheelhouse appears to be Warpless. His Warpless time is better than mine, that's for sure. And this could be one of those cases where being very good at Warpless actually is detrimental to being good at Randomizer. Because even though Dave might be better at the P-Speed strats, the P-Speed strats don't always work in Randomizer because of the enemies. A lot of the P-Speed strats from Vanilla are very dependent on enemy placement. A little surprised Dave didn't go for the P-switch there. That P-switch does speed up the end of the level, especially when you're going to check the power-up block there anyway. Very nice boomerang bro kill. Being able to defeat both of those boomerang bros with fireballs before they even shoot at you is so satisfying. And very nice reaction on his part to dodge the Paragoomba. I swear, Paragoombas are some of the worst enemies in the game. Just because when they spawn on screen, they move very differently from most other enemies, and I don't think that was intentional. Proa finding our first beta level of the run, beta 1.5, in order to add a little bit more variety to the randomizer itself. There are 8 beta levels that are not included in the final version of the game. Well, they are there, you just need a hacking device to access them in the vanilla game. What Fred has done is he's made changes to those levels to make them playable, and then added them to the level pool. So up to 8 of the original game's levels can be effectively removed from the level pool. And Proa has started the second end card. Does not get the manipulation because we do see a brand new pattern. And Proa finding the East Island, able to make use of that hammer. So now Proa has opened up nearly a 1 world lead. His consistency in this tournament and the past tournaments has just been sick. And that's what wins you races, is not having a great peak performance, but having a great average performance. Proa thinking about skipping this fort with a cloud, but we haven't seen any clouds yet. And I definitely don't blame him for that, because we haven't seen any of the nastier forts yet. Keeping track of which levels have been played is a very important skill in this randomizer. And both of these piranha levels in World 7 will also contain an item, and the rich get richer. We have another hammer on Proa's side. Dave does manage to pull off the 4-4 skip. Interestingly enough, the water level in the NES version versus the All-Stars version has actually changed. So the setups for jumping over that wall on those versions are different. And Proa has reached the halfway point of this seed in 21 minutes. For the Group 1 flags, you'll typically see completion times around the 45 to 50 minute range. Group 2 is a lot more volatile because of the nature of the world map, and you're going to see that in the next race. And Dave has found the final hammer, the final hand stage by going to the South Island. So if he can find the way to the East Island from the South Island, that would save him a hammer, and that could wind up being very relevant down the road, because we have not seen a lot of worlds where hammers are super useful. We haven't seen World 5. We're actually just seeing World 4 now on Proa's side. So by being able to save a hammer, that might be able to allow Dave to make up some time if he can find the other entrance to the East Island. Yes, it was. It was, but I don't really count those because it's actually pretty statistically unlikely that you won't have at least one vanilla airship, just because there are only 7 of them. And Proa has found the waterfall stage. This is actually a stage that you want to see, because it's typically very short. There are no enemies. The only thing that can go potentially wrong is if you jump one too many times before the exit pipe. You can screen wrap and fall to the left side of the screen, where you'll be forced to wait out the timer. And Dave has found 8F. It should be really interesting to see Dave go through this fortress. With a runner with this much Warpless experience, the door cycle should be no problem, even with the random enemies. Most of the time, the random enemies don't affect your chance of making the door cycle too much. Oh, just barely misses it. That's too bad. So we'll see if Dave is familiar with the backup. It just goes through the door. And it does look like Proa is going back for this Hammer Bro. Very interesting. And is rewarded with a cloud. Now, once you get to the latter half of the run, these level skipping items, as you find them, become quite a bit less valuable. And there's a star for Proa. That's one of two things that you do want to see at the end of every run. When you get to Bowser's Castle, you do want to have a hammer suit and a star. Oh, come on, Proa. Come on, Proa. You gotta mash this. So one oddity about that platform is Mario's fit in between the ceiling and the moving platform is actually pixel perfect. So if you take out a turbo controller, you can actually do 30 hertz jumping. Very nice star kill on the World 6 Fortress. And Proa is just about done with this 5th world. I think the only worlds we have left are 3 and 5. Now, Proa is accumulating a supply of P-Wings, so I'm a little bit surprised that we're not starting to see P-Wing uses on airships. One thing that can help you is some airships are significantly sped up by a P-Wing usage, and keeping track of which airships you've played can save you time. And Dave, unfortunately, getting the runaround in World 7. And gets the troll pipe, so unfortunately, he last locationed the way to the end of the world. That's too bad. It just always feels terrible to... It always feels terrible to last location the way to the end. Oh, Dave may be lost. It's very easy to get lost in the network of pipes that's World 7. There are 16 pipe tiles in this world. Proa gambling on the back half of World 3. This is interesting. You usually don't see this gamble. And with that, it does look like Dave has found the way. But at this point, he should know that the last two pipes both lead to the end. So if he takes the first pipe and then finds the hammer-locked position, we'll see if he's familiar enough with the randomizer to realize that he does not need to spend a hammer to get to the end. He will need to play one additional stage, but that is absolutely worth the price of admission. And it does look like Proa is done with end cards. Does use that cloud. If this is not the way to the end... Oof. This use of hammers might allow... This use of hammers, depending on how his routing goes for the last few worlds, might allow Dave to make up some ground. But Proa does have a pretty big lead at this point. It's about a 2-world lead. So unless something really crazy happens in Worlds 5 and 8, this is Proa's race to lose. Not to clarify a question in chat about the locks. The locks are not actually shuffled in this particular flag set, so you will know which fortress breaks which lock. So there's an argument to play an extra. There's an argument that playing an extra level is worth saving a hammer, but Dave might feel he's having to play from behind to be able to complete this. To be able to try to make up time, might be taking some risks that. Proa wouldn't, and Dave is skipping the piranha plant, so he is not going to get that hammer that Proa got at the end of the 4th world. What a bummer. Proa just making all the right routing decisions in this seed. And Dave missing the P-Wing clip. It was very smart to start using the large number of P-Wings that the seed has given the runners. But it can be very easy to miss those clips. You have about a little less than half a tile of leeway to actually make the P-Wing clip work. And as far as records go, Proa currently has 4 wins. This is Dave's first match. So if Proa does get a double win, then that will clinch a bracket spot. So for those of you just coming in and not being familiar with the tournament structure, we have groups of 5 runners, and it's a double round-robin format. Each of these runners will be playing all of the other runners in their group twice, and the 2 runners from each group with the best win-loss record will move on to the bracket phase. So by math, you do need 6 wins to be able to clinch a spot. Depending on how the bracket falls, you can get there with 5. But to 100% clinch a spot, you need 6 wins. And Dave finding himself in 6-6, this is a level that we did not see from Proa, so Proa just making, again, all the right routing decisions. And sometimes it can just come down to who picks the right levels. Oh my goodness, Dave got robbed there. Sorry, Dave, you can't fly over that level, unfortunately. So this is what we were talking about coming into play at the start of this race. Dave is only familiar with the levels that you would play in Warpless. And Proa's randomizer experience is really coming into play in this race. If Dave has a hammer, he might consider going back. Oh no, he doesn't have a hammer! And Proa finding Atlantis. Atlantis is a beta level that, for technical reasons, we cannot remove the auto-scrolling from. Otherwise, it crashes the level. And this is something that Fred has been unable to fix. And Pro, unfortunately, getting caught by the Blooper and Children. And Proa is out of hammers. P-Wing here is a very interesting item choice. It does look like Proa is going to fly over all of Atlantis. Does need to actually be careful to get back in the water, because if you do fly over Atlantis, you can soft lock at the top of the level. Just because the pipe is underwater and under a bunch of ice. Dave going through a lot of items, very desperate to finish the seed. Getting past this particular stage, but 6-6 is never a level you want to see. It is one of the I believe it might actually be the longest non-auto-scrolling level in the game. There's very high enemy density. Adding extra bloopers and other nasty enemies to the stage can cause a lot of problems, as well as just induce a lot of lag. So it's usually a very slow level. One that if you run into it, you'll see a lot of runners actually take an intentional death and use a cloud. And Dave does make it through 6-6, Proa finding himself in the pyramid. Oh no! There's a boss bass at the end of 6-6. This is a brutal stage. I feel absolutely terrible for Dave, and I also feel partially responsible for this because I was the one who rolled this seed. What a rude video game. The other concern is that Dave is running very low on items, so he's not going to have much for the latter half of this game. That boss bass at the end of 6-6 is so mean. And speaking of mean, Proa has found himself in 7F2. Viewer favorite. Viewers always want to see this level. Runners never want to see it. Ooh, that piranha plant formation is just awful. Anytime you have piranha plants in perfect sync, at that point, it's almost impossible to get through without taking a hit. And speaking of rude levels, Dave has found 7-5. So Proa's hammer plays just skipped all of the nasty levels in the seed. Proa about to open up a 2.5 world lead going into the final world, World 8. And 7-5 with a boss pass. This is just not been his race, and it just continues to pile on for Dave. Oh my. So Proa with that hammer use in World 4 managed to skip 2 of the nastiest stages of the game. And Dave down to just a P-Wing left in the inventory. Meanwhile, Proa flying over the World 2 airship will have another chance to do a P-Wing clip. See if he gets it against Roy. And Proa might be a little too low. We'll see. This is a close one. And there is actually a mode in this randomizer to force permanent Frog Mario. Now, with that mode, some of the levels do have to be modified to be completable. We'll see how long Proa decides to go for this clip with a tail. Only decides to give it a couple of tries. Probably going to take an intentional death and then use either a mushroom or a fire flower to try this clip again. This is a very smart play by Proa. Or we'll just P-Wing over the level, because 7-6 is the clip level that you can actually P-Wing over, and we do that in the vanilla run. Because even though a clipping is faster than using a P-Wing, it's only faster if you get the clip within 4 tries. So with World 8, what you need to do is you need to find the correct pipe that will take you to Bowser's Castle in this flag set. World 8 is a completely different animal in Group Flags 2, as you will see in the next race. Typically in Group Flags 1, when you're exploring World 8, you want to find the Dark Room as quickly as possible, because 5 of World 8's 12 pipes are going to be located there. Very nice P-Speed strats from Dave in the Carpet Fort. The vanilla experience is definitely showing, but vanilla experience only gets you so far in Super Mario Bros. 3 Randomizer, and being an extremely skilled Warpless runner can actually be a detriment in Randomizer. Proa using the last hammer in the inventory. Saving one hammer for World 8 can be a payoff, but not this time. Proa finding the hand bridge on the other side of that pipe and saying no, and I do not blame him one bit. We're getting close to the 45-minute mark, and this has been a very fast seed from Proa's perspective. So this is one of those cases where you might actually be worried about the progress that your opponent is, because neither one of these runners can actually see where their opponent is. Proa does find the correct pipe, finds a 7F1 with a tail. We'll be able to complete this very quickly. And Proa still does have a star and a hammer suit for Bowser's Castle. So this race is all but a wrap at this point. Proa with the hammer suit, with the star, going to be heading through Bowser's Castle. This will be a very nice time as well. So the reason why you're not seeing Proa jump straight up these staircases is because as of version 1.2, all of the space waffles in the game have actually had their directions randomized. And Pro with a very quick hammer kill, gonna wind up with a time of 45 and change. And there's the door. There is the dot done. Proa has saved Princess Toadstool and has won our first race of our double. And has done so with an official SRL time of 45 minutes, 38 seconds. GG to Proa. Well played. That is correct. The only piece of information that you get about where your opponent is when it's too late. So that puts Proa to 5-0 in his group. One more win, and he will clinch his division. And absolutely give both of these runners a follow for what they've done in this race. Proa absolutely slaying this seed, and Dave having to put up with an absolute nightmare. What a trooper for finishing this race out, because it does look like he is going to finish this one out. To explain the tournament structure, for those of you who are new to it, it is a double round robin. There are 2 different sets of flags that will be in effect for the group stage. There are groups of 5, so each player will play 8 games, and the top 2 of each group will advance to the bracket stage. So 6 wins will clinch a division. And Dave, finding himself in World 6, takes an unfortunate death to the giant paratroopa. Dave, very, very low on items, actually uses his last power-up. That's something you never want to see, is just being completely out of power-ups. And that's just another case of Super Mario Bros. 3 having notoriously terrible hitboxes on some enemies. You need to be especially careful against giant enemies, as well as fighting any Koopaling that has been randomized to have Iggy's jump height, because he's moving fast enough that he can actually clip through the bottom of Mario's hitbox and cause you to lose an exchange that you would otherwise think you would win. If any enemy moves fast enough to clip... It's just any enemy that moves fast enough to clip through the bottom of Mario's hitbox. This Navy stage causing Dave a few troubles. And oh no! Gets cannonballed right before the pipe. Now, because the auto-scrolling has been removed from these stages, that actually changes the dynamic of every airship, every artillery stage in World 8. So it changes the strats completely, and that can be very daunting to a runner that is used to vanilla. And 4-3 is another one of those levels where the enemy positioning can make it nigh impossible to do the piece speed strats that make this level so much fun to play in vanilla. But still manages to get through cleanly. And it does look like Dave does not realize... Dave does not realize that he should be able to deduce which way is the way to the end of this world, so he's actually playing some unnecessary levels right now. Oh no! Dave burns a cloud to get past stage 6 of this world and finds himself in the other auto-scroller, 5-9. This is something you never want to see. Because depending on what enemies you get, if you get vanilla fire chomps in this level, it can just be terrible. That is correct. Dave did not try the first pipe. So he is not going to be too happy when he makes his way past that fortress and that pipe spits him out at the beginning. And 5-9 is the other level that cannot be de-auto-scrolled for technical reasons. The reason why is because of the way the NES does the diagonal auto-scrolling. It's actually amazing that the NES is even capable of diagonal auto-scrolling in the first place. And to clarify a question in chat, we know that the level that Dave passed was not an auto-scroller because we've seen both of the auto-scrollers. Meltdown in 3, 2, 1. So now he's... What is he doing? At this point, this might just be lack of familiarity with the randomizer, because He has a pipe open to him that he has not taken yet. So he is going to last location the World 3 pipe, in addition to, logically speaking, playing some levels that are completely unnecessary. So now he's going to have to do the level that he clouded over anyway. It could just be a case of he thought he checked the pipe but did not. And as far as white mushroom houses, I do not believe that they actually function in the randomizer. And Dave, completely out of gas, has absolutely no items whatsoever in his inventory. So what Dave's going to need to do after this race is he's going to just need to perform a mental reset, and it can be very difficult to mentally reset from something such as that. Dave does make short work of Wendy and moves on to World 7. So just everybody in chat, can we give Dave some energy? How about some Franker Z for this man? So Dave, on to his 7th world. I don't recall any of the levels being too terribly difficult. Dave is going to at least finish off this end card, just to get a couple of extra items. And I do not blame him, with him being completely out of items. And does get 2 very nice items, considering the inventory situation, a mushroom and a leaf. And it does look like Dave wants nothing to do with 6-5. Given his inventory situation, I don't blame him. Is going to use that last leaf and tackle this fort, which is 6F2. It does immediately take a hit, gets the leaf back. He is going for 6F2 fly. Or maybe not. After having a little bit of issue with the beginning of the stage, Dave does get through nicely and will be in the sky in pretty short order. Now, of note, the World 5 Tower is one of 2 stages in the game that's not moved from its location, just because because the tower stage actually functions more like a pipe in logic than an actual stage. The tower is something that you will see in every Group 1 flags randomizer, but in Group 2 and in brackets, it's actually pretty rare to see people play the tower. And you will likely see that come into play once we get to the next race. And Dave is going to have to play Atlantis just like Proa did, and is not going to be too happy to see a star at the beginning of this. So he's actually going to have to play most of this stage without taking a hit. Not quite sure why he used a star here, because 1, there is a star at the beginning of the stage, and 2, the star will run out before you even have a chance to kill an enemy with it. And this is not the most friendly Atlantis stage either. And it does look like Dave was considering a forfeit, but is going to continue to soldier on. And at this point, I would definitely not blame him if he decided to throw in the towel. Oh, and this is going to get him killed too, isn't it? Oh, he is swimming underneath. I didn't even know you could do this. And unfortunately, it does look like that Dave has thrown in the towel and has forfeited. So with that, we are going to set up for the next race. And you will not need to wait until the scheduled time of 1:30. We are going to get the next race started as soon as possible. The racers are not required to do back-to-back, but a lot of racers do tend to do that. And it does look like we are getting both of our runners in the second race. And when asked about the second seed, Proa said hit me. So I will go ahead and deal this one out. Hopefully it's not as bad. So for those of you just joining us on Speed Gaming 2 today, we are now in the back half of a doubleheader for the Super Mario Bros. 3 Randomizer tournament between DaveLindo and proa007. Proa is currently 5-0 in his group and will clinch a bracket spot with a win. Dave is currently 0-1, so it is very early in this tournament for him. A lot of racing still to go. So to clarify all the changes that have been made, the world maps are going to look very, very different. All of the locations on the world maps have been shuffled around, so pipes can go anywhere, fortresses can be anywhere, locks can be anywhere. It makes the world maps much more dynamic, and it tends to reduce the value of level skipping items. And it can make races towards the end very, very interesting, as you will see when we get to World 8.